I'm really happy to have Art Bilger from Working Nation here. Art is, I was introduced by Rosemary Sagar a few years back, and he spoke at our events a couple of years ago and has spoken continuously since then. In the time that I've known him, Working Nation has had phenomenal growth in terms of who they service, how they service, the people that are working with them, their partnerships, etc. Art's a Wharton guy. He's got a long storied past as a financier and in media and entertainment. And he's been a go-to guy on a lot of deals in the past, got some great relationships with some fellows in Atlanta as well. So I want Art to come on up here, talk about Working Nation, the future of work. As I said earlier at the beginning of this, a lot of us have gone through many career changes, and what Working Nation really focuses on is, what are the jobs that were there 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 1 month ago, they're not going to be there anymore. But the jobs of the future are pretty darn fascinating. And Art's going to come up and talk about this. Art, why don't you sit here and we'll get you all started.
There's a camera somewhere?
There's a camera right there. And I'm going to come up and show you. Just give me 1 second here. That's where you are right here.
It is. Okay.
Right. So you're good.
I never look so good.
The magic of the camera. So introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi. Good morning. And for those who are sitting in Greece, it's good evening, I guess. It's funny you say that. I just 2 weeks ago, my wife and I and a couple of friends, we were over in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So, and I live in Los Angeles, so 11-hour time difference. I got the feeling of what it was like. Anyway, but thank you all for joining us this morning. As Marty mentioned, he and I connected a number of years ago, and he's provided me with the opportunity to speak about Working Nation and what I really believe is the most critical issue we face in this country when you really cut through it. And I'll explain why. Anyway, quick background. As he mentioned, I did go to the Wharton School. I also actually went to the University of Chicago and for grad school. And for some of you might remember, when I went to Chicago, I had to get a, they were, even though I'd taken macroeconomics at Wharton, I had to take macroeconomics at Chicago. July of '75, I now start macroeconomics at Chicago. And I was just hoping it's not going to be a total duplication. And it wasn't. I learned a whole new side of economics. And I learned, remember, this is July of '75. I learned all about supply side economics. And I also had the funniest stand-up comic professor for that course of any course I'd ever taken in high school, college, grad school. His name was Art Laffer. And so I learned all about supply side economics and the Laffer curve and all. And as you know, a few years later, he went off became a chief economic advisor to Ronald Reagan. And then so it wasn't a dupe. I really learned new stuff there when I did learn all about the value, how to price and value options from a guy named Myron Scholes. Chicago is other than the winters. Chicago is a great experience. Anyway, fast forward, I'm now, I knew for a whole bunch of years I wanted to be an investment banker. That's as a result of when I was 16, I was a runner on Wall Street for one summer. I was back in the days when you had to deliver checks and stocks and bonds and all. I was the youngest runner at Spingarn Heine & Company by 50 years. But when I came back to, when I went to public school, guidance counselor says, if you like Wall Street, Art, you got to go to the Wharton School. So that's what led to it. Anyway, initial job out of grad school, a little unknown firm. Don't ask me why. I was very young because I didn't work in between college and grad school. Little unknown firm called Drexel Burnham. I think I was the 21st corporate finance guy to be hired. When we went out of business in February of '90, there were 600 investment bankers. When I moved to LA In like 82, I was the second investment banker. We went out of business through 89 in LA. So I ended up as co-head of investment banking there at Drexel, and it was an incredible experience. And it very much, that and subsequent things which I'll describe, really is what brought Working Nation together in my head as a thought, and then as a, really getting into the execution piece of it. Working Nation, it was 9 years ago last month that I was at a Deutsche Bank dinner in New York. It was the night before the US government might default on its debt. And I was invited, and I was in New York, and I said, yeah, go check it out. Larry Summers was the guest speaker. He talked all about China. He talked all about default and all. And then he opened it to questions. And I don't know, maybe I drank too much wine, but when he opened it to questions, I was sitting up close to the, where he was speaking. And I raised my hand, they gave me a mic, and I basically laid out, Dr. Summers, can you explain am I right about the structural unemployment issues that we will face in our country as a result of 4 variables coming together like never before in history? Globalization, technology, longevity, units of labor staying in the workforce much longer, and broken education coming together like never before. Interesting back and forth with Summers, and he got it. I met with him subsequently. He got it. But the reason I'm here talking about this today is when we were done and he left the stage, 7 different guys in the audience, and these were all major fund managers, top corporate executives. None of them knew me, but 7 different guys chased me down that night afterwards. One guy chased me into the men's room, basically saying, I can't believe I've never thought about this. And I said, wow, if the giant fund managers in New York aren't thinking about this, then the average American isn't. I really began digging in and trying, am I right about the structural unemployment issues that we may face? And, because of my Chicago and Wharton ties in the investment world, and by the way, post Drexel, I was one of the founders of Apollo Advisors. So that added a couple other pieces to what led to this. But I really started thinking this, is this a real issue? And I really, from a research standpoint, really began digging in. Ultimately concluded that yes, I think I'm right about this. And I also discovered there were people out there who were thinking about this. But they had no visibility. I remember, maybe I forget the name of the organization now, a woman who created a not-for-profit to teach coding to young Black women. But she touched about, 75 women a year or something like that. And I just said, wow, why not touching 750 people a year, with that type of thing? So ultimately, I created a not-for-profit media enterprise. Working Nation's a not-for-profit media enterprise that is basically, the central mission is identifying where the jobs of today and tomorrow will be. And when I say tomorrow, I'm not talking about 20 years from now. I'm talking about 3 years from now, 5 years, 7 years from now. And then what are the solutions? And what I had discovered is there were solutions that were local, but had no visibility. Local being what companies were doing, what not-for-profits were doing, what academic entities, what local government was doing. Not running around Washington, D.C., even though, yes, federal tax policy and budget policy can have an impact, but the solutions themselves are local. And basically decided to create this media enterprise to, one, do the research, but then tell the stories. And we go after 3 audiences. Audience 1 are those same guys and women who chased me around the Deutsche Bank dinner years earlier, because if they understood could actually make something happen. You know, to walk into the head of HR and say, hey, you see what so-and-so's doing? Why aren't we doing something like that for our employees or their families or whatever in terms of training, skills, et cetera. Then audience two we go after are the people who are actually working on solutions, because they can learn from each other. And we've seen great examples. Remember, we told the story of this one organization very early. Our official launch, by the way, was September of 2016 on CNN's platform, then Time Inc., then Fortune. But we told the story in October of 16. And a short while later, your average billionaire in Detroit reached out to me. She didn't know me, but through some common acquaintance or whatever, reached out to me. Basically said, it's crazy what they're doing, what I'm learning from you. Can you connect the head of my foundation to the people at the organization who told the story? It was called Year Up, which many of you may be aware of. Fabulous program. So that's audience two, people who are doing things, who can learn from each other. And then audience three is just mom and pop and young people across the country. You are looking at the Wharton, the founder of the Wharton Schools, founding funder of the Wharton Schools whole data and analytics program, dating back to 07, 08, when I convinced the then new dean that data and analytics would be, over the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, would, literally be, there wouldn't be an aspect of business, government, or the not-for-profit world that wouldn't be driven by data and analytics. And to his credit, in that meeting, he said, let's go. And we launched the whole data and analytics program there. Well, we're sitting here today. You've got, yes, we still need MIT data scientists, and yes, we still need Wharton grads. But the average mom and pop and young people in Nebraska have no idea that getting data and analytics skills from a community college program nearby or a certificate program, you could walk into a job, the snap of the finger, and get paid substantially more. I know that. We at Working Nation, I'm sure many of you know that. But it's an example of what we're trying to do with media, is to educate the broad spectrum of society. Now, you may think I'm out of my mind about why would this guy create a media enterprise? He worked at Drexel Burnham, he worked at Apollo. Well, in 1985 at Drexel, I met a really interesting guy. His last name was Turner, first name Ted, and I became investment banker for Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting. I'm the one who helped Ted buy MGM. I'm the one who figured out how to keep CNN out of bankruptcy in the second half of '88. I'm the one who brought him Hanna-Barbera to start the Cartoon Network. Then at Apollo, I was the guy who bought up the majority of the bankrupt debt of Telemundo in '92. I didn't have to be that smart. I lived in Los Angeles. Hispanic broadcasting might be an opportunity. So I became chairman of that company, or the creditors committee actually, but did get deeply involved. And then we at Apollo, with Ron Perlman, took two bankrupt TV broadcasts, brought up the debt of two bankrupt TV broadcasters, put them together with one healthy one, and then courtesy of a $1 billion check from Rupert Murdoch, we changed all the affiliations to Fox and created the largest Fox affiliate group of stations in the US, 15 to 20% of the market. And then Perlman asked me to go in and run it. And I told Ronald, I said, Ronald, I've never run anything. And I don't even watch TV. And he says, that's why I want you on. So yes. I did go in and run a company called New World Communications we created. And so I ran, so if you were Ted Turner's investment banker back in the 80s and into the early 90s, and if you ran Rupert Murdoch's largest affiliate group of stations in the 90s, you learned, it wasn't too hard to learn from two guys who really figured out how to educate and influence people in this country. And obviously they went on to the globe. I'm not I'm not at the globe level. So the whole concept of using media to, and basically as a woman, major foundation in New York said to me recently, she said, Art, you taught me all about the multiplier effect. What happened was I was talking with her at breakfast at the Regency Hotel one day. This is Francine Lefrak. Francine says to me, Art, so what does Working Nation do? And I said, well, you know, Francine, if you give $1 to a not-for-profit, you're hoping to get $1 worth of value. I said, if you give $1 to Working Nation, our goal is to create $5 worth of value, the multiplier effect. And there are two industries that understand the power of that. And that's the media world and the advertising world. And so, as I said, we created this not-for-profit media enterprise. And I will say, from day one, 3 major themes, and they continue to be the major themes. The title of our first piece that we put up on CNN's platform in September 16, we called it Slope of the Curve. Slope of the curve of the change in jobs and skills when measured against time has never been so steep. Changes of that, and this was before COVID. And obviously COVID has accelerated this dramatically. As a dean at NYU said to me about 1.5 years ago, she said, Art, when you spoke here at NYU in February of 20, your opening line was that over the next 10, 15, 20 years, blah, 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 blah. She said, Art, courtesy of COVID, I would chop about 10 years off your timeline. So anyway, theme 1, issue 1, slope of the curve. Issue 2, this time it's about the heart of America. And we do plenty on the bottom 20%, but very focused on the heart of America. It's about the bottom 20 becoming the bottom 30, the bottom 40, the bottom 50%. An example I used to use back when we first started talking about it was driving for a living, middle-class job. It's the number one, it was then, I don't know if it still is, but it was then the number 1 job in 32 states. And we were all talking about over the next 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years, driverless vehicles. And what are we going to do with all these middle-class workers? Now, my idea that I used to talk a lot about was they could be trained into rebuilding the infrastructure of this country. Now, no, I never did talk to Joe Biden about an infrastructure bill, but I will say when I saw the infrastructure bill, I said, yes, that's the type of thing from, yes, to get rid of our potholes, but also from an employment standpoint. Third real motivation, and this is the one that I think is the greatest challenge, is never before have we had to reskill and re-educate all the 48-year-olds in this country. And I use 48 to be representative of people outside of normal academic years, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. You know, once upon a time, came out of whatever education level, you got a job, 30 years later, you're retired. Boom. Lifelong learning is a very key theme of ours at Working Nation, and that is what's required. Because both from a skills level, a globalization level, a longevity level, you know, people, life expectancy extending very nicely. Those are all going to require lifelong learning. And whether it's the people who sit around the room like this, and generally I assume most of you are pretty well educated to start, but we have a country of 330 million people. You know, spread across 50 states. And I really do believe one of the fundamental issues that we are having, what we're seeing today in this country, is that there are millions and millions of people in pain. Now, some of that pain is economic pain, you know, because of, you know, changes and all kinds of things, including employment. But another pain, this is an important theme of ours at Working Nation, is the pain, the link between employment and purpose in life. is an important theme of ours. Who's read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning? Okay. Whoever hasn't, and if they want to give me a card, you will get a copy of the book. First, it was probably the most meaningful, one of the 2 or 3 most meaningful books I've ever read in my life. First quarter of 16, so I'm busy working away on all this. And 2 things happened. First, I turned on Morning Joe, which I was watching this morning. And interesting, this morning, there was a whole thing on loneliness. This actually ties in, but just so happens this morning. But I turned on Morning Joe, first quarter of 16, and many of you may know Steve Ratner, the Bloomberg investment guy. Steve's on, as he frequently is, with multiple, 2 or 3 charts. He comes on with 2 charts. First chart shows how life expectancy of white males had begun to decline in this country for the first time in history. And then he put up a second chart. The second chart showed causes, showed massive spike up in addiction and in suicide. And I said, I know why. And I will tell you, shortly afterwards, I saw a map of, I think, parts of the Midwest and the Northeast where it showed addiction. And where obviously it's going to be obvious, so many of the biggest spikes in addiction are places where there used to be factories. So anyway, that was one thing that happened during the first quarter of 16. But the other thing that happened was Giselle Fernandez, the pretty renowned journalist who I've known a long time, since I had to greenlight a TV show when Giselle was the original host called Access Hollywood. Anyway, Giselle came to me in the first quarter of 16 with the movie rights to Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. She wanted me to make a movie. I told Giselle, sorry, Giselle, I got this Working Nation thing going, time and money wise, I just can't make a movie. I was aware of the book, but had never read it. I read it, and it just cemented in my mind the link, something that I had been thinking about just in my own life. But then I started thinking about the assembly one, the link between employment and purpose in life. Take even the assembly line worker. They get up, he or she gets up Monday morning, they go to work. They're part of a team. They produce, they bring home income, feed, educate the family. They're part of a community. And so that was such an important piece of, and I was being confronted quite a bit by the whole idea of universal basic income is the solution. And my answer to that always was, 1, I don't know how you pay for it, but then 2, where's the purpose in life piece? And I believe a lot of what we've seen in this country today is, a lot of the breakdown in purpose out there. And I really think that's, a key thing. And that, as I said, it's a major theme of ours at Working Nation.
We got about 5 minutes, Art, so
Should we?
I want to ask some questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a.
Well, let me just thank Marty and Rosemary here. Both are executive committee members of Working Nation. And we've got tremendous, help from people like them in terms of moving this forward. I will tell you, I'll finish with this, that we are now at, and Marty made the reference, we are now at a point where we're real. We're very real out there. We are connected throughout this country, our team, and I've got an incredible team of people who have been with me 7 years, 8 years, et cetera. But we've got major foundations like Lumina and SHRM and U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, all major supporters. Then we have incredible conferences where we are the media partner, whether it's ASU, GSB, Milken, SHRM, others. We've got some very interesting funders, just individual. Dirty Harry, Clint has loved what we're doing since day one. Matter of fact, if you look, we dedicate the month of November to veterans workforce related issues and opportunities, Clint being a very key funder of all that. And then corporations. now have come on and played different roles: funding, distribution. Comcast, Google, IBM, JP Morgan Chase, LinkedIn, Walmart, Apollo, Fed banks. I was meeting with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia yesterday because we're going to be doing a big event with them and Deloitte and others in Philadelphia on workforce related issues. That's, I'll stop there.
You're in a very interesting position because, you know, all these jobs are coming back to North America, that manufacturing jobs that caused this malaise you were talking about. And so, you know, how are you guys organizing yourselves for handling what is expected to be a surge in manufacturing jobs? But those jobs have dramatically changed from what you had 40 years ago. I mean, these are robotics oriented, lots of software, lots of operations organization. You talked about that?
Yeah, that's, you know, you're absolutely right. So, you know, one key thing is, as you point out, things are coming back, but a lot of decisions, and I think COVID, you know, a lot of the technology decisions that businesses might have made over a 5 or a 10-year period of time got accelerated dramatically during COVID, because all of a sudden, if your people can't come to work, okay, let's change the technologies. And so, yes, jobs are coming back, you know, from elsewhere in the world, but the skills level are totally different. By the way, one of the areas that also drove me into this, and it's an area, primary investment area of mine. In 2002, Mike Milken called me up and asked me to invest in an online education company called K-12. He and his brother and Larry Ellison of Oracle were funding it. Bill Bennett, former Secretary of Education, and Ron Packard were the founders. I looked at it and then I told Mike, I said, look, Mike, I have no idea if I'll make any money, but I will invest only if you can put me on the board and on the executive committee, because I want to learn. Because I was already a believer because of my, I was very key in Akamai technologies. I was already thinking about how do you deliver the incredible education my 3 kids were getting at the finest private schools in Los Angeles. And how do you deliver that 100, 1,000, 10,000 miles away? So when Mike asked me to invest, I said yes. And I was on the board for 6 years until we filed to go public. And yes, I did make money. But ed tech has been a very much a focus of mine. Either from a storytelling standpoint, like at Working Nation, but also, I'll tell you, an investment standpoint. Because to the point Marty's making, we are just gonna, for, you know, right now we got people, jobs returning for one reason. This is gonna happen on a continuing basis for one reason or another. And the, you know, the reskilling of people on it's lifelong learning is a major thing. Yes.
To paraphrase Muhammad Ali, without the will, there is no skill. Okay, so I've been enormously frustrated over the past dozen years, hiring kids out of Ivy League schools, hiring kids out of near Ivy schools. They show up, they have absolutely no will, okay, to succeed, to understand about life's purpose, to engage, try to achieve something. So, you know, when that happens, I don't want to make the investment of time into here's what you have to do in order to be successful at something. You know, I raise money for cancer drug companies, things like that. It's very hard, time-consuming, ego-bashing work. Okay, you can't do it unless you have the will. None of these kids are, when they graduate from these indoctrinated universities, they're in, as far as I'm concerned, they're in sabotage mode. So I don't care about that, and I don't see why you would try to tell somebody about here are the skills. Is there anything that you could do to send me certified capitalists so that I know I'm getting somebody with a set of values? Because right now my only retreat is to go to the religious schools where at least they have some perspective on what life is about. But
It is very funny, you're saying all this. Maybe funny isn't the right word, but yesterday, so I did take a 7 a.m. train from New York to Philadelphia. Yes, to meet with Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, as well as another couple of organizations. But at 2 o'clock, I was speaking. That's the whole reason I went to Philly. I was speaking at the University of Pennsylvania. The professor who heads up all religious studies at the University of Pennsylvania, who I met on a trip to Nepal and Bhutan, and just loves what I'm doing. And he's actually been a moderator for Working Nation events. Well, an event out in Los Angeles where we brought together I think it was 9 top religious leaders, each from a different religion, to speak about the workforce issues and all, but also the purpose in life piece that I'm talking about. And Justin McDaniel, the guy I'm referring to, and fascinating guy. Anyway, Justin asked me to come and speak to his class a few months ago, so we agreed, and that's what I did yesterday afternoon. So yes, I was speaking at an Ivy League school, but yes, it was a religious studies class. I talked all about what I've said to you, and then they had their questions were literally coming, and most of these people were freshmen. A couple of them weren't, but most of the people were freshmen in the class. And it's going to be very interesting to follow up. To your point, and it's not so much because I lived what I've been living what you're expressing there. But from mission standpoint, we at Working Nation are much more. We're not focused heavily on people with 4-year college, degrees. We're much more focused on the community college world, and even that high school graduation world, because we really are focused on the fact that we have a country of 330 million people. And so I'm not saying what you're raising. Listen, I got 3 kids who went to the University of Pennsylvania. Now one is an investment banker, and he is going crazy, making money, and his wife's an investment banker at Morgan Stanley. Then I have my oldest daughter. Her life has been this. I'm so proud of her. Since internships in in high school and then college, and then ultimately working in. And this, by the way, important theme that I play with a lot. Employment in the not-for-profit. When you aggregate not-for-profits in this country, you're talking about one of the biggest employers in this country. No, you're not going to get paid the same level of cash as you will at Morgan Stanley, but the purpose in life piece of it is right. And my daughter Sabrina, that has been Now my youngest daughter Eve, who's an incredible creative writer. And what I did with all 3 of my kids when they went off to Penn, I said, and I really did this, I said, study whatever you want. You don't have to follow in my footsteps. But I really did this. I said, there's a 2-course parental requirement. Everyone must take micro and macroeconomics. You're not coming out of the University of Pennsylvania and Mom and I paying all this tuition and not being able to understand the world you live in from an economic standpoint. Alex was an English major. He took micro and macro. Sabrina, global health and society. She took micro and macro. Eve, English major, very talented creative writer. She did not take micro. So Eve had been in the doghouse for 6 years, working in the ultimate macroeconomic learning experience as one of the key researchers and writers for Working Nation.
Fantastic.
But now she's writing for Hollywood. So we will see what happens. I think there was a question.
Well, just a quick question. I'm a mechanical engineer. You talk about pain in college when I was 19, a year of calculus, physics, statics, dynamics. That was very painful. But I think just to, with the people you're speaking to, I just think there needs to be more STEM oriented focus on education, especially at the higher level. And quite frankly, I graduated from a military academy because my parents didn't have money to send me to school. There has to be a way, looking at my tax returns for the last 20 years, I'd like to think the government got the return on investment. There just needs to be a different model, especially for private schools. I mean, blessed to put my 4 kids through the schools that you mentioned, but from a practical matter, it's not, most parents can't do that. So if there's a way, there's a little discussion yesterday about paying for college or taking a part of their salary going forward for a certain amount of time. It just, the model needs to change of how these private institutions and higher education is financed. So we can focus on the STEM, because of all the things you're talking about, work with Dover, bringing jobs back to the United States. But without, I have so many people coming to me, we need millions and millions of engineers that we just don't have.
Well, I totally agree with you, and there's only so much we can cover. And as I said, the center of the bullseye is not the students going to the University of Pennsylvania or whatever. Jane Oates, I'll just mention this and then I'll stop. Jane Oates, who is the president of Working Nation, she lives in DC. I was with her in Philly yesterday. Jane was a Philadelphia special ed teacher, then Temple University, then 11 years as head of education policy for Senator Ted Kennedy. Then she ran higher education for the state of New Jersey when John Corzine was governor. And then she was Undersecretary of Labor for Barack Obama for 5 years. This woman knows everything about education and knows everyone in education. Before COVID, she was telling me that 25% of the 4-year colleges and universities in this country were going to close down, in her mind, in the next 10, 15 years. And part of it because of what you're talking about, that there wasn't, it was a great camp to go to. I won't show it to you. My wife would kill me. But I have a picture in my bag of my what I look like between my freshman and sophomore years at the university, at the Wharton School.
All the hair probably.
But I went there. I went to Penn to party, and I did. But also ended up learning something.
The military really shaved your head the first day, and there was nothing part. There was a lot of crying.
I clearly didn't look like I had a shaved head.
Well, fantastic, Art. Listen, thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you for your interest.
I have a couple of introductions for you outside later.
Yep.
But Working Nation, and we'll publish Art's information later. I have a story about University of Pennsylvania. There's a big alumni weekend every year. You go down this walk called Locust Walk, and I was walking down, and some father was arguing with his daughter, saying, I'm meeting with all my friends I went to college with. Can you please come and meet with them? But she was just graduating, and she said, Dad, I'm graduating. I'm going to go party with my friends. I don't want to hang out with you and your old friends who went to University of Pennsylvania. And some guy on the vendor was selling a street saying, I paid $50,000 a year for my kid to go to this college, and all I got was his t-shirt. Think about it. All righty. So Michael Tippy is going to be speaking, and it's kind of Michael spoke yesterday, but it was at the end of the day. So we're trying to get him some more time.